Welcome to Ancestral Wisdom, where the wisdom of the past guides our future. Today I'd like to talk about how to drink and taste different types of alcohol, specifically whiskey, wine, and mead. Now, before we get started, I'd like to read a quote from Henry Adams that I heard a long time ago and that struck a chord with me. I'll share the quote with you, and I'll share the context in which I originally heard it. Our age has lost much of its ear for poetry, as it has its eye for color and line, its taste for war and worship, wine and women. So I didn't screw it up. But is Henry Adams saying that we don't listening to rhymed words anymore? Well, there's as much pop music being consumed today as you can imagine, but we've lost our fascination with what's difficult, to use Yeats's words, and nuance and depth in poetry. We've lost our eye for color and line. Well, we are immersed in more visual stimulation than ever we've been. But again, we've lost our ability to appreciate nuance, and instead favor brief, fleeting, over-exciting stimulation. Our taste for war and worship, there's as much violence as ever there's been, of course, but we've lost our ability to sublimate it and give it meaning. And wine and women, well, in this sanctuary of the self, post-sanctuary of the self that we're living in, people drink as much as they ever have, and they're immersed in self-indulgent hedonism. But again, they've lost the ability to appreciate nuance in fine things. So, this video hopefully will help us to understand how to appreciate nuance in our alcohol. So, let's start with whiskey. And in the description below, I'll make sure to include the times when I begin each type of alcohol, whiskey, then wine, then mead. That way, if there's one particular thing that you're interested in, you can go right there, but I'd urge you to watch everything to get the whole experience. So, whiskey. How do you enjoy it? First, take your time. Use a glass that has a little bit of a funnel at the end. This is a Glencairn glass. You could use a snifter, a wine glass if you don't have these on hand. But the idea is to funnel the scent, the nose, so that you can pick all of the scent up instead of having it just dissipate off into the air. And you're either making it or you're paying good money for it, so you might as well get what's in the bottle instead of squandering it, right? So you don't want the scent of it just to go off into the atmosphere. You want to be able to have it channel up. And so it collects in the bowl and then channels up. It makes much more of a difference than you would think. Again, use a wine glass if that's what you have available. Next, don't agitate it too much like you see people doing with wine. There's a lot of alcohol in here. And if you agitate the glass too much, all the alcohol will evaporate off. Not all of it, but a lot of it will evaporate off quickly. And you won't be able to, and when you go to sniff it, you'll just get the alcohol burn and none of the actual scent. So don't do that. At most, you're going to want to just coat the side of the glass with it. And you'll get a bit more on the nose with that. Next, with whiskey, you're going to look out for, as a beginner, you're going to look out for two particular flavors. And if you want to get more in-depth and more complex, I can put a few videos in the description below that will help you get further into it. But to start out with, you're looking for two flavors, or scents, first, when you nose it. The first scent is the scent that comes from distillation, which is usually a type of fruit. And the next is a scent that comes from the oak barrel that it was aged in. And that is usually some type of spice. Again, oversimplified, but those are a few places to start. You notice the color of this whiskey is very light. It's a natural color. It didn't spend a lot of time in the cask. I don't know the age of it. It's a non-age statement whiskey, a Scotch single malt. Compass Box Peat Monster, actually. Not a place you probably want to start. But that means that it is also heavily peated, so there's a lot of smoke, scent, and flavor. But starting with a fruit, going through the smoke in order to get to it. Definitely apple. Like a crisp, fresh apple with vanilla. So that doesn't mean there's apples in there or there's vanilla in there, but the process of distillation created a chemical which is very similar, the same to a chemical that gives apples their scent. Which is why you can talk about wines and whiskeys and things like that having all of these flavors and scents in them. It's not because they're added ingredients, it's because the process creates those flavor and scent chemicals. So from the distillation, I'm getting primarily apple. Spices, I'm getting vanilla, maybe a little bit of dill, and then I'm getting a lot of smoke. A very, very young, heavily peated whiskey is going to have a lot of smoky flavor. So it's a bonfire. There's also a bit of a maritime note, so there's a bit of salt air, sea air. And so you pick out 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 flavors, and then you just sit back and enjoy your whiskey. You smell those flavors, those scents, and you taste them. Tiny bit. Just a teaspoon, maybe less. Get initial impression. Let it roll over your tongue a few times. And swallow. Let it mix with your saliva a little bit and swallow. And you're looking for your tongue to confirm what your nose already has discovered, but sometimes and very often you'll find something different on the taste as well. So there you have it. A fruit from the distillation process, a spice from the cask, and then whatever other flavors and scents might come up. Don't search for them. Don't stress about them. Don't say, I need to find this flavor from the cask and I can't find it. Just sit back and let it happen. And let experience be your guide. In addition to nosing, tasting, and having all of the different parts of the tasting, the arrival, which is the first impression you get, the development, which is letting it roll over your tongue and seeing what other flavors arrive, and the finish, which is whatever flavor you have lingering in your mouth at the end. Besides that, I also like to give a subjective note. So far, all of those things have been objective. I smell salt air. And so someone else drinking this whiskey will probably smell salt air as well. But a subjective note is the way that the whiskey makes you feel. Does it make you feel like you're looking at the moon in a clearing in the forest in the middle of the night while you're camping alone in the wilderness? Does it make you feel like you're in an English garden surrounded by roses and sunshine? Well, so I have sea air, I have bonfires, vanilla, apple, toasted apple, barbecue, arrival, powerful smoke, The reiteration of that charred, burnt apple. Like a pork roast. Cardamom, black pepper. Then I swallow, and very spicy. Again, heavy smoke all throughout, but the cinnamon allspice. Maybe even a hint of lime in there. So how does it make me feel? Well, it makes me feel like I'm on a boat, a fishing boat, looking at in a nice clear morning. Not very sunny, but bright, with the salt spray in my face and the wind in my hair. It's a subjective note. How does it make you feel? What memories are triggered by the smell and taste? And so we took something that normally would be just shooting something back and saying, ah, that tastes powerful, or it tastes like whiskey. And instead we made it like a painting. By exploring the smell and the taste. Not only that, as it sits in the glass, the flavor and the smell will change, because the water, the drop of water that I added, it's 46%, so it could use a bit of water. Just a drop, maybe half a teaspoon or something like that. But the water will react with the whiskey, and the whiskey will react with the air, and the chemical composition of the whiskey will change, and you'll get different flavors. So I could sit here for 5 minutes, and as I continue to nose and taste it, I'll be getting different smells and different tastes. There's whiskey. Wine. So what's up next? We have our wine. Now wine, you should twirl. Again, I know it's almost painful the first time you do it, because you feel like you're one of those pompous asses that that you don't want to be like. But there's a reason for it. You don't swirl whiskey because the alcohol content is too high and you'll just get alcohol on the nose. But the alcohol content in wine is far less. And so you swirl it, you get some alcohol evaporation, but the alcohol will bring the scent of the wine up to your nose. It'll carry the scent compounds up to your nostrils and help you smell the wine. Usually you'll have some sort of fruit. I mean, it is made of grapes after all, but the fermentation process will create different types of fruit scents and taste. So I'm getting plum, like a deep, jammy kind of plum with raspberry, like preserves. I'm also getting a lot of spice. Coriander. Just a little bit. Maybe more than you would with the whiskey, a little bit more. And then just leave it in your mouth. Let the air get at it, let it go around, and see what you taste. Much more fresh fruit on the taste, which I wouldn't have expected. Like fresh peach. Deep though. Subjective note. Ancient hearth fire. In the Stone Age twilight. Have some fun with it. whatever when it comes to subjectivity, it can't be wrong. All right, that's wine. Mead. I'm actually drinking a mead that was a gift from a good friend of mine. And presentation is important. If you're drinking whiskey out of a paper cup, but you're drinking the same whiskey out of a rocks glass, it's going to taste different. And so, don't skimp on presentation. It affects the entire experience. Now, mead, most mead, anyway, the mead that I usually drink, is going to be less in alcohol than most of your wines. Not always. But mostly what you're picking up from mead is the flavors in the honey, the flavors from whatever additives were used, and the flavors from the fermentation process, whatever yeast was used to ferment the beverage. And however that fermentation changed those other flavors. So every mead is going to be different, just like every wine and every whiskey is going to be different. But you still want to slow down. Breathe it in. I'm getting a pleasant cherry here, and I'm almost certain that there was no cherry or cherry juice used in the mead recipe. I think that's purely from the honey. I'm getting like a vanilla cream. A little bit of raisin. A caramel, definitely. A little stronger than I thought it would be, but excellent, excellent. So there you have it. Our age has lost much of its ear for poetry, its eye for color and line, its taste for war and worship, wine and women. But by taking a slower approach, by listening to the sounds of your child with her joyful cries out the window, by taking a breath, slowing down time, and appreciating the nuances in things, you'll elevate your spirit and you'll enjoy the time that you have here in this life. And appreciating good whiskeys and wines and meads and beers is one step towards appreciating the sounds of the birds in the sky, appreciating the feeling of being alive, the feeling of the blood rushing through your veins, the sensations of the cold wind on your flesh, and a lover's embrace. It's a training ground for being able to slow down time and enjoy the moment. Carpe diem, quam minimum credula postero. Harvest the moment. And trust in the future as little as possible. Enjoy the moment, slow down time, appreciate your senses. And in turn, that appreciation will not lead to hedonism. It will lead to an appreciation of the potential in the future, and a greater likelihood that you will root yourself in eternity. Feurusturisas Ansus raidokenas Ebon johagalas Naudis isaiera Iuas petroelgas Suilotiwas Berkano eumanas Naudis Lagus ingvas degas O